yourself to notice that you already arrived carrying a lifetime of patterns, not as a burden, but as information. And instead of sinking into the body first, let awareness gently scan the landscape of your inner world, as if you are standing at a high vantage point, looking across the terrain of your mind and life, seeing familiar paths worn by repetition, familiar turns taken again and again, not judging where they lead, only noticing that they exist. There is no need to relax deliberately or to change your breathing. Simply recognize that awareness is present and capable of observing these inner roots without walking them. As you listen, give yourself permission to view your identity not as something fixed, but as something patterned, shaped over time by stories told repeatedly, behaviors practiced unconsciously, and emotional responses reinforced by familiarity. This is not about fault or failure. It is about mapping. Mapping brings clarity, and clarity brings choice. Begin by noticing the thoughts that naturally arise when you consider who you believe yourself to be. These might be simple labels, roles, strengths, weaknesses, expectations, or limitations. And instead of engaging with their truth or accuracy, observe how often certain themes repeat. Notice the tone of these thoughts. Are they encouraging or critical, expansive or constricting, neutral or emotionally charged? Each recurring thought is like a thread in the fabric of identity. And by seeing it clearly, you loosen its unconscious grip. Allow awareness to remain steady and curious, recognizing that thoughts are not random. They tend to loop, revisiting familiar conclusions, because the brain is wired to conserve energy by repeating what it knows. As you notice these loops, imagine tagging them gently, not with judgment, but with simple recognition. Silently acknowledging this is a familiar story. This is a repeated narrative. This is a well-traveled mental path. With that recognition, something subtle shifts. The mind begins to feel seen rather than driven. Emotions may now come into clearer focus, arising in response to these stories and habits, perhaps as underlying moods, emotional tones, or bodily reactions that seem to arrive automatically. Instead of labeling these emotions as problems, notice them as patterns as well, recurring emotional responses that have been conditioned over time. Where do they show up in the body? How quickly do they arise? How long do they tend to linger? Do certain thoughts trigger certain feelings almost instantly? Observing these connections is part of mapping identity, because identity is not just cognitive, it is emotional and embodied. As you observe, you may become aware of habitual reactions, the ways you tend to respond when challenged, criticized, bored, pressured, or uncertain. Perhaps there is a tendency to withdraw, to push harder, to distract, to please, to avoid, to overthink, or to numb. These habits once served a purpose. They were learned responses that helped you adapt. Acknowledge that quietly, allowing gratitude for their protective role, even as you recognize that not all of them are still necessary. Awareness does not dismantle habits through force. It loosens them through understanding. As hypnosis gently deepens, your subconscious becomes more receptive to this non-judgmental observation, learning that it is safe to examine patterns without needing nervous system begins to relax when it realizes that noticing does not equal danger. From this place, observe how certain beliefs sit quietly beneath thoughts and habits, shaping them from below the surface. These beliefs may sound like assumptions about your abilities, worth, safety, or potential, and they often operate automatically because they have been repeated internally or externally over long periods of time. Rather than trying to change any belief now, simply notice how it functions. What does it cause you to do, to avoid, to expect? How does it subtly influence choices and reactions? Every belief forms a loop with behavior and emotional reinforcement, and seeing this loop is the beginning of transformation. You might imagine each belief habit loop as a circuit that runs automatically until interrupted by awareness. This session is not about cutting the wires. It is about turning on the lights so you can see how the system operates. Notice how identity often feels solid because these loops repeat consistently, giving the illusion of permanence. Yet anything that repeats can be observed, and anything observed can evolve. As awareness continues to map these patterns, you may experience moments of distance from them, brief glimpses of spaciousness, where identity feels less rigid, less personal. This is not detachment from life. It is freedom from unconscious repetition. Let the mind continue to reveal patterns at its own pace. Perhaps you notice the habit of labeling experiences quickly, turning complex moments into simple conclusions. Perhaps you notice emotional habits, such as bracing for disappointment or seeking approval. Perhaps you notice behavioral loops tied to comfort or avoidance. Each noticing strengthens awareness and weakens compulsion. In this process, remind yourself silently that understanding is not agreement, and observation is not endorsement. You are simply gathering data about how your current self has been constructed. This perspective aligns deeply with the idea that the brain reinforces what it practices. And by noticing what has been practiced unconsciously, you interrupt automatic reinforcement. Hypnosis supports this by relaxing defensive patterns, allowing insights to land gently rather than triggering resistance. As you rest in this observing stance, notice how the sense of self softens around the edges. Identity begins to feel less like a fixed object and more like a living system, responsive and adaptable. You may sense curiosity replacing self-criticism, interest replacing frustration. This shift is significant. Curiosity opens pathways for change because it invites exploration rather than control. As day 2 unfolds, allow a deeper recognition to form. Your current identity is not who you are. It is what has been repeated. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates comfort, even when it limits growth. By seeing repetition clearly, you lay the groundwork for conscious repetition later, choosing which patterns deserve reinforcement and which can fade naturally through lack of attention. Toward the latter part of this session, imagine yourself gently holding all these patterns in awareness, like notes on a map rather than definitions of self. Feel how awareness remains untouched by the patterns it observes, steady and present. This knowing presence is the foundation upon which identity will be reshaped, not by erasing the past, but by understanding it. Before closing, set a quiet intention that in the coming days, you will continue to notice these loops in daily life, not to stop them immediately, but to recognize them as they occur, bringing curiosity into moments that were once automatic. Each recognition weakens unconscious momentum and strengthens conscious choice. Rest now in the sense of spacious awareness that has emerged through mapping, knowing that understanding patterns is the first true step toward transforming them, and allowing this understanding to integrate deeply, shaping the way your mind relates to itself, gently, steadily, and without resistance.